Hello, everyone, and welcome to this, our first EL check-in for the 26-27 school year. I am Cami Goucher, and the ELD and World Languages Director for the state of Missouri, and I just want to welcome you to a new school year. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about using access data for strategic decision making. That's a lot to say, but we're going to talk about using your access scores and a little bit of the what changed with our standard setting this summer. So go ahead and move on. Get my screen to cooperate. All right. So first of all, our community agreements. Same as always, we ask that you stay engaged, that you trust in the good intention of others, but still feel free to speak your truth. There might be some discomfort because we don't always all agree, but I invite you to bring your identity and know that not always do we come to closure, but we will work on it. And then I found a quote for this month that says, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And I think that's something good for us to remember. It comes from W. Edwards Deming, who is just a professor and a statistician. So moving forward. As always, we link what we do to our Missouri commitment to English learner success, our blueprint. Today, what we're talking about delves right into shared responsibility for English learners, the asset-based teaching and learning, effective, well-prepared, and culturally responsive educators, educators with high standards for English learners, with the resources they need, with meaningful and rigorous learning opportunities that build on their English learners' assets, and academic and linguistic supports. So all of those are found in the link that's there at the bottom of the page that takes you to our blueprint for success, and gives you more information on the different roles within our states from the teacher level all the way up to the state level. So I invite you to go to look at that if you have not previously. So what we're going to talk about today has a lot to do with regulatory and compliance and the framework that involves. Title III of our ESSA plan aims to ensure that our English learners attain that high proficiency and high academic achievement. Our ESSA plan and our regulations also help teachers and leaders to implement effective EL programs in their schools. And then we have Title VI of the Civil Rights and Equal Opportunities Act, which requires our local educational agencies to provide a sound language instructional education program, or our IEP, as we call them. And so our LEAs have to identify, screen English learners, provide the staff necessary, communicate with parents, and evaluate their program. That's all part of that plan. So you may be aware, I'm sure you do, that Title VI and the Civil Rights Act and the Equal Opportunities Act have all been under scrutiny from our federal government and have undergone a few changes. But despite those changes, they only eliminated the disparate impact liability of Title VI. And they withdrew that 2015 Dear Colleagues letter and that guidance. But the core mandates of those laws are still in effect. And the legal obligations regarding English learners are still there and unchanged. So schools have to continue to provide support to overcome language barriers for our English learners, and that is still required by Title VI and the EEOA. We also still are required to provide communications in languages that our parents can understand, but local districts have that flexibility on how they do that. But that's something that is required by our federal guidance. All right. So something I want to make sure that we're all aware of, and that is also a compliance standard, is that 30-day time window at the beginning of the school year to identify potential English language learners. So every district should have some form of our language use survey, and we'd really like it if you use the language use survey that we provided. I know many districts have moved away from the full language use survey and pulled out those tier one questions, those initial three questions. One thing that I would ask is that you make sure that you use the three questions as they are written on our language use survey. And then we can eliminate a lot of the problems we have with the initial identification if we are to use that full language use survey by going in beyond those first three questions and asking the additional questions if there was a language other than English noted in those first three questions. It helps us to eliminate some students who might not really need our services. So asking all of those questions only helps you. So if you do have a student that is not obviously a student with a language barrier, going through that language use survey and asking those additional questions will help you to eliminate some of those false identifications. So our language use survey asks about the student's first language, the language spoken at home, and the language understood at home. That's basically what those first three questions refer to. Any student that qualifies through the language use survey for further investigation should be assessed with the appropriate WIDA screener within 30 days of the beginning of the school year or 15 days later in the school year. It's a federal requirement that we notify parents within 30 days of screening. So in order to do that, we have to have them assessed and all of that completed within those 30 days. All right. So there are two special kind of exceptions to our screener rule. One is the WIDA alternate screener, which is brand new. It's a paper and pencil test to identify if a student with the most significant cognitive disabilities qualifies as an English learner. So after giving that assessment, the IEP team makes that decision and evaluates the information. And it's up to the IEP team to kind of decide which students would qualify for the alternate screener. So generally, we say if the student would qualify for our alternate map, and then they would qualify for our alternate screener as well. Another exception is the newcomer kit. So any school can forego the WIDA screener for a student who has only been in the country for less than 4 months and has had very limited exposure to English. So in those cases, for students in grades 1 through 12, you can forego the WIDA screener and fill out the newcomer screener kit, which is linked on this slide. And that has to be done within 15 days of enrollment so that you can send it in to my office. I can review it and then reply to you with the results of that screener request. So in order to get that back to you in a timely manner within those 30 days, so we can notify parents, it has to be done within the first 15 days of enrollment. All right, so our WIDA access assessment, and a little bit about the purpose and the domains. Hopefully you're all aware of the domains and what WIDA is, but if you're new, the WIDA access is how we make decisions about our English language learners. It's how we determine if they qualify for services. It's an annual snapshot of their performance. It's the primary data point for eligibility. When we assess our students, we look at their listening, reading, speaking, and writing, and both receptive skills and productive skills or expressive skills. And so we use those to determine what needs the student has when we're developing our program for them. All right, there are 2 scores that are a result of our WIDA access. 2 types of scores. We have both skill scores and proficiency levels. So the skill scores are psychometrically designed. So they scale from a 100 to a 600 at equal intervals. And what they do is when we design the assessment and when we look at the assessment, they take every question from kindergarten to 12th grade, and they will stack them on top of each other and determine the cuts of each proficiency level. So they can use the skill scores to determine growth over time. So it's longitudinal. It's not that one annual snapshot, but it can be used from year to year to show growth. So when we're looking at student growth, that is normally what we would look at because it gives us the most drilled down and concise measure of growth for our students. On the other hand, we have proficiency levels, and our proficiency levels are socially derived interpretations of the assessment. So they look at how, like peers who took the same test at the same grade level did, and they make comparisons and develop a cut score. And so those cut scores are developed on how other students performed on the same assessment. They do not have equal intervals. They could have big chunks and then smaller chunks of how many students are at each proficiency level within that scale. And it's different for each grade level. So there are 2 different things we're looking at with both of those, and they're both very important, and we have to use both of them each year. So using those 2, we look at both the growth and the achievement. So the growth would be our skill scores over time. The achievement, usually we look at the proficiency level, which is a student's status at one point in time. Okay, so educators, as I said, need to look at both to see that the student is achieving proficiency and showing adequate growth. And that's how we set our expectations for our students. So this summer, we did a standard setting, WIDA did. And we had 2 representatives from Missouri and myself that went to the standard setting. And what they do at the standard setting is a group of educators come together who review all of the assessment scores. And then we kind of group them and rank them to find the cut scores for each proficiency level. It's based a lot on judgment. And there are some parameters and guidelines that we follow. But our goal in the end is to set the cut scores for each proficiency level. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. So when we first got to the WIDA standard setting, they shared a vocabulary word with us that they kind of pinned at their meetings, and they called it ambition. And the way that they derived the word is they said it took them humility to realize that this was a big undertaking and it wasn't something they could do on their own. They needed help. But they also had ambition to do the best that they could to meet that goal and to come away with a product that fit and worked for our states, and for the consortium. So humility plus ambition, Humbition. And I kind of challenge you this year to use Humbition as we go forward with the year, knowing that, this is going to be new. We can't do it all alone, but have that ambition to try anyway. All right, so with our standard setting, kind of the reasoning behind, in 2011, we had 4.6 million English learners in our school system. By 2021, 10 years later, we had 5.3 million. So it grew by almost a million. And by reports, 1 in 4 students currently speak a language other than English at home. That's projected to be 40% by 2030, which isn't that far away. So we have to keep that in mind. Our population of English language learners is growing every year. So that's part of the reason why we've made these changes. The why of access, again, we're determining what services our student needs and monitoring their progress, but we also use it to address accountability to make sure that our school systems are meeting the needs of our students. So our students need to show that growth each year if we're doing the things we should for them. All right, so again, why standard setting? Well, it happens every time you have a new assessment, when there are major revisions, or if state policy dictates that it's needed. It's been 10 years since the last standard setting for WIDA. And we do have a new set of 2020 standards that our assessment wasn't addressing. So now we are aligned to our 2020 standards. We have a brand new writing rubric for our assessment, so that's a change. The writing rubric goes more deep and there's more precision in what they're looking for. We also have a brand new kindergarten test that was written and deployed this last year. So we had to make some adjustments to fit that as well. There was one group at standard setting that was dedicated just to kindergarten, and so they did all of the domains. The other grades, 1 through 12, they broke them into smaller groups, and part of them did listening and reading. The other part did the speaking and writing for each grade level. So they were broken into smaller groups. But kindergarten, that was one large group that did it all on their own. So they handled everything. All right, a WIDA fact. The WIDA access is a standards reference test. And if you don't know what that means, it means that student performance is compared to the WIDA standards framework. Any student can achieve any score. They're not ranked against each other, and they're not ranked against any expected performance of monolingual English speakers. So it's all based on our WIDA ELD standards framework. Okay. Some changes that came about and are a result of our new assessment. There are new rubrics for speaking and listening. Standard 1 is embedded throughout the entire assessment. Before it was just kind of mentioned in certain areas. Now it's throughout all of the assessments. They updated the vertical scale with new grade level baselines. Now the paper pencil and the online assessment match each other. They're not different, so they're much the same all the way through. There is a new Performance 1 task for Tier A speaking because they said that was lacking. There's a brand new storyline for kindergarten. So I'm sure if you gave the assessment last year, you noticed it's not the same story anymore. There are also fewer materials needed. I know I had trouble shuffling and finding all of the cards and keeping them separated in the right stacks. They've streamlined that, and there are fewer materials that they need. They also have a separate score sheet for each domain, which helps as far as calculating and entering that information. Again, as I said, the new assessment addresses our 2020 standards framework. and the proficiency level descriptors by grade cluster. Things that didn't change, the scale score remains a 1 to 600 score. The changes to listening and reading don't affect the construct or the design of the assessment. It's all the same. The speaking and the writing didn't change the way it's constructed, but it is interpreted now based on the proficiency level descriptors, which were not being used before. Also, the weighting of the scores, that didn't change at all either. It's still listening 15%, speaking 15%, reading 35, and writing 35 when we're getting our overall score. Only the cut scores are changing. So that's the only thing that we worked on to set, and those are the only things that are different for the coming year. And in case you need a reminder, our WIDA standards, that standard 1 is the language of social and instructional purposes. Standard 2, the language for language arts. 3, the language for mathematics. 4, the language for science. And 5, the language for social studies. And all of those are interwoven throughout our full access assessment and our standards. Okay, so calculating the growth on based on proficiency level. So proficiency levels for 25-26, those scores you just got back, are directly comparable to our 24-25, which means you can put a 3.4 from 2024 next to a 3.4 for 25-26, and they're the same. So you don't have to worry about any kind of difference in the assessment. You can make direct comparisons between proficiency levels. The growth models that relied on proficiency levels can be calculated then by subtracting 1 year from the other to determine how much growth. So if they had a 3.4 last year and they have a 3.6 this year, they made 0.2 gain. Okay. And this is what it looks like using the overall proficiency levels. In kindergarten, this is the average growth over time. So you'll see in kindergarten, every year since 2022, the students have made about a 2.1, 2.2 growth. There hasn't been much change. That's the average overall composite. In first grade, for several years, it was 2.7. It fell slightly to a 2.5 this year. For the second grade to third grades, it was consistently around the 3.1, 3.2. It rose slightly this year with the new assessment. 4 to 5, it stayed pretty much level from where we have been before. It was 3.8 several years, then 3.7. It's back up to 3.8. 6 through 8, the average was 3.2 to 3.1, not much change there. And 9 through 12, the average was 3.1 for several years, with 2022 having a 3.2. So you can see, even though we have a new test, our proficiency levels, they stayed pretty consistent. We haven't changed very much since 2022. So even though it's a new test, even though it was configured differently and everything, it still came out pretty much the same. So that should make us feel that our test is well designed. On the other hand, our scale scores are not directly comparable. It's like taking, they likened it to taking the ACT and the SAT. They're two completely different tests, but we can look at them and make a crosswalk between them, saying, if you scored this on the ACT, that's about the same as scoring as this score on an SAT. So they developed what they call a concordance table that shows that range on where a student would likely fall on one test based on the score on the other test. So they use this concordance table to report your scale scores for 25-26. And if we want to show growth, we have to, again, use that concorded scale score, subtract the previous year score to show our growth. So it's not exact, but it's close. I mean, their confidence is within a range that is shown in that concordance table. And so with the overall composite scale scores, using that concordance table, these were the results of the average over since 2022. And again, you'll see kindergarten and first fell just slightly below where they have been in the past. Whoops. But everyone else stayed pretty consistently where we have been over the past 4 years, 5 years. So not a lot of difference. So again, we're right where we need to be as far as our scores and our reliability of where they're falling. So there's not a lot of change over the past. So that means when we look at our reporting for the state, there's not going to be a lot of change in how we do things. It should stay really consistent. All right, the concordance tables, they're just to help make that comparison between tests, as I said, but they do involve a measurement error, and because it's not precise, because they're not the exact same test. And again, there can be a wide range of difference. So in the previous score, they might have had a 242, and this year that same score might be a 275. So there's a little bit of discrepancy of where they fall on the stacking of the scores, but we have made that concordance table to help make those comparisons. So this table shows the average composite scale score gains over the last few years. So first grade, because that's when we look from one year to the other to see how much they've gained. They made slightly less of a gain this year. And that's to be expected because we had a new test. And from what I understand, the kindergarten first grade test is a little bit more difficult than it used to be. But then when we get to second, third, fourth, fifth, 6, 8, and 9, 12, there isn't as much of a change. And in some cases, they did better this year as far as scale score gains. So again, fairly consistent to what we've seen in the past. So as far as where we're going and where we've been, the scale scores reported on the 24-25 and the 25-26 can be compared using the concordance table. The proficiency levels are directly comparable, and the individual student reports are the same template that we've used in the past. For 26-27, the scale scores will be directly comparable. So we will be able to take the scale scores on the 25-26 and 26-27 and use those straight across to show growth. But then when we get to the proficiency levels, there will be a new concordance table because this year's proficiency levels were based on our 2016 scale scores because we hadn't done our standard setting yet and created those cut scores. But now we have, and so there will be a concordance table for the new proficiency levels to correspond with where we have adjusted our new cut scores. So that area will be different next year. And we will also have our new individual student report using the new template. It will now be a 2-page report with proficiency level descriptors described more in depth on the back. It also has a kind of a definition of terms used as well. All right, so after the standard setting, what next? In August, in August, they will review the findings from this summer's standard setting. They will create the new score tables. In September, it goes to their TAC committee and their executive committee at WIDA for approval, and then they will go to work at creating a communications toolkit about standard setting to send out to everyone. In October, they'll review a final review of that toolkit and the information, and then they'll provide some accountability files to the states. And then in December, they'll release their technical report and they'll start implementing the new cut scores, and they'll be used on our new assessment. In February and April, they'll send out some resources to help you explain the new cut scores and the new test, and all of the information to families also gives us a better picture of what the changes look like. So for Missouri, no changes to the 2026 reporting. You're going to use the scores just as you have in the past, just knowing that the scale scores are not an exact measure, that there is some adjustment there with those concordance tables. This year's, they were adjusted with those tables, so look at the individual student growth based on their proficiency level. No changes to our exit process. We use the same exit criteria we have in the past. And looking at those charts that I shared with you, we may not have to change anything because it's fairly consistent from where we have been in the past. And there may not be very much change to what we've seen before. So we may not have to change anything at all. So that's also reassuring. All right, so how we use this information. First of all, we need to make sure we remember who our English learners are. A, B, and C define, they come with some sort of barrier for success in the classroom. They come with another language that's influencing them. Part D is where we hone in on what our goal is. So we're looking at students who have difficulties in speaking, reading, writing, or understanding English that denies the individual the ability to meet challenging state academic standards, the ability to be successful in classrooms where English is the language of instruction, or the opportunity to participate fully in society. Those are the things we're concerned about in the classroom. So we need to address those. When it comes to our student, there's no changes to monitoring English language acquisition. We still have that initial screener. Like I said, that language use survey is very important for determining who we screen. Again, review those first 3 questions. We want to make sure they're consistent across the state. So look at your questions that you're using and make sure they match what is on our language use survey. And then when you look at your access results, we're going to use those to plan for the goals of our students and develop that individual academic plan or individual language plan, whichever you call it in your district. But we use those results to determine the areas of need, where the student is lacking. Do they need more assistance with speaking? Do they need more reading instruction? What area are they weakest in, and how can we bring them up for the next assessment? Because the annual measurement, our access test, is coming up every year, and that's what we want to help the students work towards improving on. Our proficiency scale, remember, it goes from 1 to 6, and we're wanting to get them to that 4.7 when they're ready to exit. We exit them automatically at a 4.7 unless there is something, unless we have evidence in our portfolio that says they're not really ready to exit. This was just a fluke and they did really well on this assessment. But if there isn't a situation like that, then we do exit them at a 4.7. All right, so looking back at 2025, I pulled some data and put it together. In 2025, as a state, we had just over 856,000 students in our Missouri school system in 554 districts and charter schools. Of those students, 44,431 were English learners. And they were only reported in 208 districts out of our 554. We had 12 districts who enrolled over 1,000 English learners, and the district with the most students had a little over 3,800 students. We also had 119 districts that had less than 50 English learners, and 70 of those had less than 20. So we have those who have a lot, and we have many that have very few. We also had 346 districts that didn't report having any English learners at all. Okay. For our 44,000 plus English learners, we only have 1,090 identified certified English language development instructors in our state. And we had 1,050 English learners in 71 districts or charters that didn't have a specialized ELD teacher working with them. So that's something we're working on as a state. One thing I can report is that our ELD certification has gone through a revision, trying to make it a little bit easier to get certified to be an EL teacher. So we're looking at that. It has gone through the first stages of being approved by our Board of Education, and we've gotten it out for public review right now. So those are coming in the near future. Hopefully by the beginning of the next semester, those will be ready for use. All right. Also, if you go to our ELD hub, there is a summer academy that kind of goes over this information and goes in a little bit deeper. So that's something, if you're new to ESL, ELD, go back and look at the summer academy linked here, and you can find some more information about how we work as a state. Also, on our data dashboard, you can find specific information about your district and the state. You can make comparisons between two districts, and it looks much like what's on the right side of the screen. So as a state, in 2025, we had 5.06% of our state were identified as English learners. All right, so the next slide is going to talk about the current year. So in 25-26, we assessed just under 44,000 English learners. And that's really close to the 5% mark of our population. We're down in overall population to just about 879,000. And when we look at our English learners, 93% of those students are served by an ELD program or an ESL program of some kind. So we have about 7% that aren't served in any kind of program. So we're staying consistent to where we were last year. In the past, about 60% of our students were in grades K through 5. Now we're about 50-50, K-5 and 50% 6 through 12. So half and half at those grade levels. And still we're right at 70% of them speaking Spanish at home. But we have over 200 languages spoken in Missouri. So the other 30% are divided amongst those other 200 languages. On the right, you see a breakdown by grade level. On the grade column, it tells you how many students we assessed at each grade level. And then when I look at overall proficiency, I kind of looked that chart that we had where it showed that a majority of our students were at the level 3. We're very consistent with the national information that we just shared, because the majority of our students, as you see in red, were also at level 3. So our Missouri students are performing very similar to what the rest of the nation's English learners are as well. So we're right on target with the statistics that others are seeing across our nation. But this gives you an idea. In kindergarten, one thing I kind of wanted to point out, I've had people say, well, we're over-identifying our kindergartners because we assess them with just the listening and speaking at the beginning of the year, and that puts a lot more in the program than we need. But when you look at our overall proficiency of the kindergartners we assessed, 64% of them were at a level 1 and only 13% were at a level 5 or higher. So that tells me that the ones we're assessing, we're pretty much on target, and we're assessing the students that need to be assessed and working with the students who need to be assessed. So that kind of gives us a little bit of information that's helpful on the kindergarten level. All right, so after we look at this data and we break it down and we look at, what proficiency levels our students are at, what domains they're weak in, we start developing our academic plans to help make sure that we are meeting their needs in core content and Tier 1 instruction. We want to emphasize to classroom teachers and to all teachers that using the student's primary language is an asset and not a deficit. We need to build upon that to strengthen where they are in the classroom. Also, always we're telling them that all teachers have to be language teachers. As I said, we had 7% in classrooms without an ELD teacher. So we have to make sure that everyone knows how to work with these students. And that one thing we do not have in our state are enough EL teachers. I've had districts call me daily in the last few weeks saying, what do we do? We can't find an EL teacher. How do we meet these students' needs? And so we're having to find ways to meet their needs without a teacher. And they're hiring aides for a temporary fix, but we really need the training and we really need some assistance. So classroom teachers need to know how to work with them. And that's one thing we're working on this year. Content teachers and our EL teachers have to work collaboratively to build in that differentiation and that scaffolding into their daily lessons. And so one thing as a state that we're doing, they've been taking, all of our content area directors have been taking me along with them when they do PD to talk to teachers, to classroom teachers about how you scaffold and how you work with your English language learners in their classrooms and things you can do as a content or a classroom teacher to meet those needs as well. So we're trying to get out there. Our MEL staff is also really good about that. So if you want them to come in, they can come and talk to you about how to work collaboratively to do that scaffolding with your content and grade level teachers as well. So ask for their assistance. This is something we developed with help from Springfield last year. This translation guidance graph, I know a lot of classroom teachers think, well, all I have to do is translate it and that's going to help the students in the classroom. But there is a good time and not a good time to use translation. One thing we'll say about translation is if you let them translate everything every day, then you're not challenging them to learn English, and they'll rely on translation and not try to learn the English as quickly as they need to. So it's a tool, but we don't want to let them use it as a crutch. We want to try to scaffold with that as well and take it away as it's not needed as much. A lot of times we try to give them that productive struggle and only look up the words they don't know. But anyway, this chart kind of gives you some guidance on when to use translation and interpretation. So the link will take you to where you can print this off for yourself as well. All right, program accountability. I kind of hinted at this already. Reclassification is still going to be 4.7 or higher unless there's some conflicting data that you can say they need to stay in. Monitoring after they exit, still for 2 years. We have MY1 and MY2. During that 2-year period, if you decide, I don't really think they were ready to exit during that 2-year period, you can pull them back in and give them more support. If at the end of that 2-year period, they're flying high, then they're great. They don't need services anymore. They move on to AY3 and AY4, which are just federal recording. During the first 2 years, you have to actively monitor their progress, which means you check in with their classroom teachers on a regular basis just to make sure that they are doing fine and making progress in an English-only setting. Okay. And then the Castaneda test is still in effect. And what that is, there are 3 things that we look at that the program that you're using is based on sound educational theory, that your program has adequate resources, which includes a teacher, and that you have results that show that your students are making progress and exiting the program. So those 3 things are federal requirements that we follow every year. If you're not meeting the demands of those 3 requirements and a parent wanted to complain, that would be a reason for Office of Civil Rights or someone to get involved and come and evaluate your school. So it just takes someone saying, hey, they're not doing one of these things for an investigation to be started or prompted. So just keeping that in mind, that those are requirements and they could have consequences if we didn't follow them. Also, I don't know if you're aware, but your EL program is part of your CSIP evaluation, which is part of our ESSA plan. So the link at the bottom takes you to our state ESSA plan. A school is evaluated. Each school is evaluated for CSIP with a 10-point scale. And so ELA is worth 2 points. Math is worth 2 points. ELA growth is 1.5. Math is 1.5. And then we have ESL, English Language Acquisition. Progress in ESL is 1.5, and proficiency attainment is 0.5. So you get 2 points for your English learners out of this 10-point scale. And then attendance is worth 1 point for a total of 10 points. And this is just an example of how it might be computed and what it might look like. So there is weight that is given for each building that has English learners. If you don't have English learners, then there's an adjustment, and you can find out more about that if you look through our Missouri ESSA plan. But just so you're aware, there is value to your program, and it does count as points towards the evaluation of your school on the EL indicator. All right, some changes that are coming, some other changes to WIDA's assessment. Coming in 2930, there will be a separate Braille assessment, and there will be new Braille administration training courses. And until they've gone through the alignment process, they will still report the Braille assessment with the pre-2026 scale score and proficiency levels. The Braille assessment still uses the older individual student report with the 2012 proficiency level descriptors. So it'll be kind of a mixed mode reporting. You'll get one report that is based on the old papers, student reports, and one part that's going to be with the new 2027 reporting. Until they get the new assessment up and running and all aligned, there'll be those 2, but afterwards it'll all be streamlined into one. So coming 2930, there should be that one streamlined assessment. Okay. Some new accommodations for WIDA Online and WIDA Screener Online. There is a brand new manual and a new checklist that are coming out. So you can check those links there. There is also assistive technology that will be available for students with IEPs. So they can use like speech to text, all of that. It's something that has to be pre-selected in WIDA AMS. The third party software has to be activated before you launch the assessment. And again, they're going to have some training and some more information about that. It's all available in there, how you set that up and how that works. Something that many people are excited about, there is now manual control of the audio for the students taking the listening test. So that's available for the WIDA paper, including the Braille. But for the 2027 access, all students taking online access or the screener online will push a play button to begin the audio when they go to the next page. So it doesn't start automatically as soon as you go to the next page. That gives the students a little bit of time to look at the pictures, look at the information, think about what's there before they push that play button. So that's really nice. There's also now available for WIDA Screener Kindergarten and WIDA Screener Paper large print. You can purchase that from the WIDA store, or you can download from the where you download those two items on the website. You can find out more about all of these updates and get them as they become available through this QR code or through the WIDA News link that's here on the screen. So I invite you to sign up for that and pay and log into that to check on those updates as you want. Also, the WIDA screener has new test demos and test practice that were updated on June 26th. Those are already available. WIDA screener has its own webpage where you can go to find out what trainings you need to take, what's available, what changes have been made. So I invite you to go look at their new screener webpage to see what you need to know about the new screeners. Then WIDA for 26-27, excuse me, there is going to be a webinar on September 1st on what's new. So you can go find out about all of these changes from WIDA themselves. They'll talk to you more in depth and give you some ideas when things will be newly released and what's going to be available. So you can get to those through the WIDA portal with this link. I believe you have to sign in to watch that. Okay, the WIDA Access Online will also have new test demos, new test practice, and new sample items, and those will be updated in September. So you can be on the lookout in September for those updated items as well. Then with AMS and DRC, there are also some new updates. You will have some different options for printing your test tickets on sometimes printing them all on one page or printing them full page. So there are some different options on how to print your test tickets. Those accessibility features that I spoke of are being incorporated and will be available for our 2027 assessment. And then the audio for paper access will now be streamed through WIDA AMS. So you won't receive CDs. The Braille kit will be the only one that still gets CDs. Everything else will be streamed through WIDA AMS. So you don't have to keep track of those CDs if you're doing the paper assessment. Also some changes to the individual student reports. Excuse me, just a minute. The WIDA access and alternate access reports now look very similar. In the past, the WIDA alternate access looked completely different, but now when you lay them side by side, they look very much the same. They've removed some of the unnecessary coloring that was on our previous individual student report. and they increase the font size. It'll be a front back from now on. There is, as I said, that important terms box added, and the second page will have the new PLDs and links to the access score and reports page so that you can have that information readily available. This one's an ask of you. So WIDA is recruiting educators to serve on a panel to review items from potential kindergarten reading assessments. So if you are interested in participating in a panel, it's going to be a 3-hour Zoom meeting where panelists will learn how the reading items were developed, be trained in reviewing items for bias, and observe a mock administration of select items when sharing and share some insights. And then October 29th from 1 to 4 is when you will participate in this. You have to be a kindergarten teacher currently. You have to currently work with English learners. You have to be bilingual in English and at least one other language. They prefer that you have administered the access test in 25-26. If you meet those requirements and are interested, you can follow the link at the bottom of the screen to fill out this interest form. And they provide an honorarium for $100 for serving on the panel. So if anyone's interested, I invite you to click on that link and fill out the interest form. All right. So the foundational steps for English language learners are core premise. Okay, so what this is dealing with is WIDA released a new focus item, a focus bulletin on reading, assessing reading. Reading has been the big talk all across our states with a lot of initiatives on reading success plans and literacy development. So there is, again, the link at the bottom says Focus Bulletin on Assessing Readings. So their stance on how we should assess English learners in reading. They talk about phonological and phonemic awareness, phonics and orthographics, vocabulary comprehension, and fluency. So they address all of those areas, but we also, as a state, developed the EL Steps to Success that we've been working on trying to get published for a couple of years now. There is a link there to the final iteration of that document that I invite you to look at that talks about EL Steps to Success here in Missouri and has some practical ideas on how to help our English learners to be successful readers. So that's available for you. The news article from WIDA is very good, but I invite you to look at our state guidance as well. So the next thing I want to talk about is some professional learning that's available to you as a Missouri educator. We still have our self-paced modules. They've added several to those. Those are available starting September 1st and go through the end of August 2027. They're self-paced. You do them at your own leisure. You can spread them out over time. It doesn't have to all be done in a certain amount of time. It's just whenever you have time for them. There are several things on different categories like science, math, social studies. There's one for newcomers. Lots of information there, so I hope you take advantage of that. Some districts use these self-paced modules as their PD, so you can do that as well. Do them as a group, do them individually. It's kind of up to you. We also, this year, I have scheduled 3 facilitated webinars for our state. The first one is coming up September 21st and 28th. It's a 2-part series on actionable practices for centering newcomers. And when I spoke with the representative from WIDA, it sounds very exciting. They're going to give us some things that you can actually go and do in your classroom tomorrow. There will be hands-on activities. They're going to provide resources that you can download and take with you. I think this is a brand new offering that sounds really exciting, and I think it will provide us some great tools and resources for working with our newcomers. So if you're interested in that, you sign up on the DESE calendar. The link here tells you where it's highlighted the title. It will take you to a flyer that tells you more about what's offered. It's limited to 60 people, so sign up as soon as you can. You have to sign up by September 4th, so that's quickly approaching. So hopefully you'll sign up for that and we'll learn more. Once you sign up, it will take you to a Canva site, same one that they use for other trainings for WIDA. And you have access to that clear to August of 2027. So even though we're taking the webinar right now, we're going through the webinar right now, all of the resources and all of the tools that they provide will still be available on their site where you can sign on and go back to them throughout the year. The other two offerings are nurturing speaking growth, which seems to be one of those skills that we all need help with. And so we have that in October, the end of October, 1st of November. You'll have to sign up by October 9th. And then the last one is scaffolding learning through language, which kind of goes with any educator. So you can invite your colleagues at school to attend that one with you, or just gain some information that you can take back and share with them. But that one is in December. So 3 opportunities for training directly from WIDA with resources. And again, all of the materials that we gain from these are available through August for you of next year. We also have a WIDA screener training that's coming up. And make sure that if you are new to working with English language learners, that you right now go through that WIDA screener training, because you have to have that completed before you're able to administer the screener to students. So if you're going to be testing new students this year, you have to have that training taken care of. They have opened the training window, so that's available. They've updated it and it's ready to go. So please, if you haven't gone through the screener training, you need to do that as soon as possible. The WIDA annual assessment, all of our dates are now available on that Missouri WIDA page, which is linked here. So when you have to order materials, when the assessment date is, if you want to put that on your calendar, that's all available on our Missouri WIDA page now. So I invite you to go there to get all of those dates. As I said earlier, this September 1st, they're having a Welcome Back What's New webinar through WIDA, and that will take you, this link will take you directly to where you need to sign up. The WIDA conference is still accepting virtual participants. In person is full, so if you haven't signed up for that, you can still sign up for the virtual space. And you get access to all of the resources that are presented at WIDA when you sign up for the virtual space. At the bottom of the page is another through Incella, is a 4-part learning series that is available to any educator that I wanted to provide you access to if you're interested in finding out more about language programs. So this is free as well, and you just go to their website and sign up for those. So some other PD that's available to you. We will have our WIDA check-ins all this year as well. In August, we're having this one on WIDA data. September and October will be those WIDA webinars in place of our personnel doing the WIDA check-in. Instead, we'll be doing the WIDA webinars in place of us speaking. In November, we'll do portfolios. December, we'll have that other WIDA webinar. January, we'll be talking about formative assessment. February, translanguaging. March, culturally sustaining pedagogy. April, exploring creativity. And May, program reviews. We're also going to be offering some book study opportunities. We haven't got those solidified yet, so please stay tuned and we'll put some more information out about those as it becomes available. Also, I wanted to make sure that you know that we still have our 5 regional specialists that are available to come into your schools and offer professional development or just help if you have a need that you want to talk to someone in your region about. You can contact through these email addresses on the screen. We do have a new person in Region 2, Kendall LePage. She's here today. So Kendall will be happy to help you as well. But give us a call if any of us can help you. And as always, I'm also available to help out as needed. And as always, we have a presentation evaluation. If you found any of this information helpful, please let us know so that my bosses know we're doing a good job. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end today. Here is my contact information. Please contact me anytime if you need assistance. We do also have 2 listservs that I invite you to sign up for if you don't get them already. The top one in blue is our EL listserv, where I send out updates from WIDA. Any information that comes through my desk that's like immediate needs. So if you're not signed up for that, please do so that you can keep up on any of changes in our state and in the nation. And then the bottom one is for world language educators. So we also have a newsletter for them as well. All right, with that, I'm going to say have a great school year. Welcome back. And we hope to see you for our WIDA webinar next month. All right, thank you.